So why don't we go ahead and start recording.
We're recording now.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Marie Diener West. I have the privilege of serving as the chair of the Master of Public Health program, and I'm also a professor in the Department of Biostatistics. And I'm really thrilled to be able to welcome you today to an incredible panel discussion that is offered by SOURCE. And SOURCE is our community engagement and service learning center for what we call the tri-schools in the East Baltimore campus, the School of Public Health, the School of Medicine, and the School of Nursing. I know that this will be a great opportunity for you to learn about SOURCE, what it does, what its mission is, and who its partners are, and also to learn about the student opportunities that are available through SOURCE. So I would like to introduce you now to the founding director of SOURCE, Mindi Levin.
Thanks so much, Marie. And welcome, everyone. We're thrilled to see so many folks joining us in this virtual space. Before we get into our panel discussion, I'm going to give a brief overview of SOURCE to kind of get y'all familiar with the work that we do, as well as have an opportunity to introduce you to our team members who are here with us this morning. I am going to go ahead and share my screen so I can get some slides up here. Are folks seeing my screen? I'm seeing the head nod from Azan. All right, welcome everyone. So first, I am here in Baltimore, Maryland. So we like to start out with a few quick acknowledgements. We certainly want to acknowledge and give thanks to the Piscataway tribe, who are the indigenous people who are the traditional owners of the lands of the Chesapeake Bay region. Of course, we recognize all indigenous peoples who are the traditional owners of the lands and the waters of the United States of America. We also want to acknowledge the impact of racist systemic oppression, including the practice of redlining, which you'll hear about, which has impacted the lives of Black and brown folks here in Baltimore. So as Marie mentioned, we are the Community Engagement and Service Learning Center for the health professional schools. And our work is really to engage those schools with Baltimore communities in mutually beneficial partnerships that promote health as well as social justice. And we really engage our work around our core values, which include reciprocity, making sure that there's mutual benefit both to the schools and our community partners, as well as justice, service, and collaboration. I'm sharing the URL for our website as well, because a lot of our information you can find online if you want to explore a little bit more at a later time. So as I mentioned, I wanted to briefly introduce you to our team. Some will have various speaking roles today. So as Marie mentioned, I'm Mindi Levin. On the call today is also Dr. Tyler Dareth, who is our Associate Director. Tyler, do you want to unmute yourself and just say a quick hello so people can see you?
Hi all, happy to be here with you today.
Great, thanks Tyler. Keilah Jacques is one of our Assistant Directors. Keilah, want to say hello?
Good morning, everyone.
Thanks, Keilah. And Keilah is going to be leading our panel discussion. Tony Bridges, who is another Assistant Director on our team. Tony, want to say hi?
Yep. Good morning, everybody. Look forward to working with you.
Great. Vanessa Pinkney, who is our Administrative Coordinator and the backbone of our organization. Vanessa. She's here somewhere. All right.
Welcome.
There you are. Good morning, Vanessa. And Ezat Shahade, who is our Communications Specialist. Ezat.
Hi, everyone.
Great. Glenn Ross is our community consultant. We'll have opportunities to introduce you to him as well. And then the other thing that I wanted to quickly mention is that our center always hires a number of students, federal work study qualified students, to serve as program assistants in our office. And we'll be announcing those positions soon. So if you're a person that's interested in community engagement, social justice, service learning, social determinants of health, et cetera, be on the lookout. I also want to quickly mention that we have a governing board that has representation from across all 3 of Hopkins Health Professional Schools, as well as community organizations that work along with us, and of course, students. So here at the School of Public Health, the faculty members that serve on our board include Dr. Josh Sharfstein, who's the Vice Dean for Public Health Practice and Community Engagement, Mike Ward, who's the Associate Dean for Enrollment Management and Student Affairs, There's lots of other folks, but for those that are MPH students, as well as other incoming students, there's an opportunity for you to have a leadership role in serving on our governing board with all these fantastic people. For the MPH students that are here, there's an opportunity for you to apply to become a SOURCE governing board member. There's a deadline of August 16th. And for other incoming students, you'll have a later date once people arrive a little bit later in the fall. So more information to come and to be circulated on that. The role that we have with SOURCE and our public health students is really to encourage all of you to collaborate with local public health and community-based organizations. We recognize that this year is going to be different. We are starting out virtually, and there's still an opportunity, no matter where you are in the world, for you to support Baltimore initiatives right here. But there's also a lot of the work that we do that can be of service to organizations in your own backyard. I also highlighted here, you'll see on the screen, that in 2019, our school was the winner of the Association of the Schools and Programs of Public Health's Harrison C. Spencer Award for Community Service. So community engagement is something that is really critical to the work that we do, and we've had some very intentional efforts over the year to continue to improve our partnerships here in Baltimore. So we're really proud of that accomplishment. Now, I tell you that we really want to encourage you to partner with community-based organizations, and there's many reasons for that kind of partnership. For one, some of the courses that you're going to be taking are going to introduce you to a lot of the theory. Well, we're going to give you an opportunity to take that theory and apply it to a real-world setting and have a practical experience. I can also tell you, and I'm sure others will talk about this as well on the panel, that a lot of our community organizations will tell you that they have needs that could be fulfilled with our students as well as with our faculty and staff. And they actually are like every year, when are the new students starting? When can we get them on board? This is a great networking opportunity. A lot of folks have built their resume and CVs from this experience. And again, we are working with you to build this sense of community by working together with fantastic collaborators. Now at SOURCE, we do have an intentional focus on Baltimore City. This is our own backyard. This is where we do our work. And we partner with over 100 nonprofit organizations and community-based organizations in the city. Clearly, I don't have time to tell you about all of those amazing partners, but on our website, you can actually take a look at our online directory. And that directory is organized by various topics, which will include advocacy, neighborhood development organizations, environmental organizations. And really, if there is a particular health topic that you're interested in, or if there's a population that you want to partner with, we likely have a community-based organization within our network of amazing partners here in Baltimore. And the involvement opportunities that we offer through SOURCE are also very diverse. So we have opportunities that range from the one-time to the long-term, the things that are completely related to your academics or a break from your academics. And some of these opportunities that I'd like to highlight for you is that we do provide a number of opportunities such as internships, practicum opportunities with organizations, capstone opportunities, our work study positions at SOURCE, as well as some of our local partners that also hire for federal work study positions. Again, there's going to be a number of different virtual or remote engagement options that we're going to put out to our student population. Most of those are going to be working with Baltimore-based organizations, but again, you can still do this from your own homes, wherever they might be. And that also includes the academic service learning courses that we support throughout our health professional schools. Many of these courses are still going to be up and running this year, and we're going to have opportunities for you to have virtual engagement, and again, still supporting Baltimore. We do various programming around social justice. We collaborate with student groups, and we also have a couple of opportunities that are coming up. Our SOURCE Service Scholars Program, which applications open up today, and we also have an information session later this afternoon that we'll record and share out, as well as our Baltimore Action Projects. You'll see announcements for student applications for that particular program a little bit later in August. And we also have co-created and co-direct the certificate in community-based public health. So lots of different options are available to our students. I do want to highlight just briefly, because I recognize we have some MPH students on with us, that there's a special relationship between SOURCE and the MPH program. We have a lot of joint ventures and programming that are underway. Certainly we have the opportunity for you to have a capstone project with a local community organization in Baltimore. We also run the Baltimore Community Practicum course, which is a multi-term course, second and third terms, where you are going through a practicum experience with an organization while also being a part of a weekly academic course. This is a unique course because you actually have to apply to get in the course. You can't just register for it. And on Monday, when we have the MPH Practicum Information Session, we'll talk briefly about that course, as well as a number of other courses that we support through Source that give you that practicum opportunity connected to a learning opportunity here at the School of Public Health. We also run a program that years ago was created with MPH students. These were students that wanted to have an opportunity to engage with community, but without making a long-term commitment. They were students that said, we really want to develop our public health skills, but in our quick program, I don't know if I can commit to the entire year. So we joined students with our community organizations to develop what is now known as the Connection. And the Connection is our community consultant program. We put together small teams of students, about 3 to 5 students per team, to work on short-term projects that have been identified by our community-based organizations. And these teams are mixed between students from our 3 health professional schools, as well as mixed based on students' own identified skill sets. So whether you have, for example, let's say it was a grant writing project. If you've never written a grant in your life, or if this is what you're doing in your professional life before coming back to school, the teams will be mixed in order for you to work together in partnership with community organizations on these short-term projects. We offer projects in the fall, the winter, and the spring terms. We also have a number of different events that you're going to hear about and see throughout the year. In early October, we host our annual Baltimore Week for folks that are learning more about the city, are new to the city, and we want to highlight some wonderful assets that we have in our community, and lots of other events that are giving you a little bit more information about the context here in our city. We also will have a number of different opportunities to introduce you to our network of partnering nonprofits. We have our Practicing Justice, which is our social justice series. We do quarterly donation drives. This year, we're going to be doing some virtual drives when people are apart from one another. And towards the end of the academic year, we have our annual National Volunteer Week, which we're celebrating all the work that's been done by our various stakeholders. At that point in time, we also give out our annual Source Awards. We have a program called our Source Service Learning Faculty and Community Fellows Program, in which we are training faculty and community leaders together in service learning pedagogy, which in turn offers you, our students, more opportunities to have these real-world 4-credit courses where you're building your own skills while simultaneously supporting community-based organizations. And we also have a number of opportunities to engage in critical reflection experiences with our team, as well as with some of our student reflection leaders. So I want to just end here with telling you a few ways that you can stay connected to us before I turn it over to our panelists. We have our electronic newsletter, which we refer to as our Source Service Scoop, SSS, Source Service Scoop. So if you are interested in receiving our electronic newsletter, please just send us an email at source@jhu.edu and type subscribe and tell us that you're a new public health student, and you'll receive that newsletter on a regular basis. We are also on social media, so you can always find us at JHU Source. And then we are also available to have one-on-one meetings with our students to basically serve as your matchmakers to community engagement opportunities. So we invite you to join us throughout your time as a Hopkins student, and we're really looking forward to working with all of you. I'm going to stop my share here. See all your faces again. Wonderful. I am going to turn it over to Keilah Jacques. Keilah is one of our assistant directors, and Keilah is going to lead us in our panel discussion. So I turn to you, Keilah.
Thank you so much, Mindi. I am going to share my screen, pardon me, as I fumble with technology here. Brilliant. So again, my name is Keilah Jacques, and I will serve as your MC. This conversation is to just help you get a better understanding of how to serve in Baltimore. So for some reason it won't go full screen, but we'll just go with it. Thanks again to Dr. Maura James for giving us the opportunity to share voices from our community partners with you. Mindy's already done the land acknowledgement, and so I will move really quickly into our conversation with our panel as we are short for time. But also want to give you the opportunity to recognize that now that you are with us at Hopkins, you are a community member. And as a community member, knowing these voices, hearing their stories, and getting a better understanding of how to get involved in Baltimore is a great way for you to learn how to apply the things that you are learning in the classroom. And so I will start by welcoming our panelists and sharing a little bit about them before I pose a couple of questions that will help you better understand how to get involved here in Baltimore. So first we have, in alphabetical order, Pastor Gary Diittman. Pastor Diittman was as Mindi mentioned, a community fellow in the SOURCE program. He is also a pastor at Grace Lutheran Church, where he has served since 2009. In his role, he's responsible, as you will hear, for some of the community outreach, and we have the opportunity to partner with him. Students have the opportunity to partner with him quite often on some of the community work, including the work with the food pantry and the community garden. Also with us, we have Maura James, a graduate of the Bloomberg School of Public Health. Maura has completed both her MPH and MSW in her time and graduated in 2018. Now she works for the City of Baltimore Department of Finance in the Bureau of Budget Management. We also have with us Dr. Haneefa Saleem, who is an assistant professor in international health, also a SOURCE faculty fellow alum, and focuses her work in the Department of International Health. And also we have with us Jordan, and Jordan, please redirect me on pronouncing your name correctly. Villalobos, is that correct?
Yep, very good.
Brilliant, who is the Director of Development and Communication at Project PLASE, which focuses on addressing homelessness here in our Baltimore community. Really excited to have each of you with us. And so I am going to open the floor by really just putting the information that may be most obvious out there. Baltimore has spent lots of time in the news thanks to the uprisings in 2016, post the death of Freddie Gray, and also built lots of visibility thanks to the TV show The Wire. Unfortunately, these images don't always paint Baltimore in a positive light and provide detail on the lived experiences and the systems of oppression that community residents navigate. So keeping that in mind, will you share with us the lens that you have for Baltimore and the ways that students can develop their own understanding outside of these media images? Feel free, either of you, to address any and all of these questions.
Maybe I can start. Go ahead, please. So this is Haneefa Saleem. I would just say, I mean, I've been in Baltimore on and off for the past few years. I did all of my schooling here, and it's really, at least for me, it's been living in Baltimore, living in the community. I live in the city, I live in Greenbelt West, and interacting with my neighbors to really help to just understand the resilience of the city, especially during this pandemic. I've really seen my community come together in terms of supporting legacy residents, in terms of supporting those who are most vulnerable within our community, especially with the epidemic. And it's might be a little difficult if you're not necessarily here in Baltimore. But as Mindi and Keilah said, there are plenty of opportunities to get involved in the city. Through my work, I have a service learning course, and we're being creative this year. Normally we have students engaged and interacting with Baltimore-based organizations in order to carry out a project over the course of 3 terms. And I don't think those opportunities are being lost this year, and so I would really encourage you to try to find a way to just learn about the great work that nonprofit organization and a number of Baltimore-based organizations are doing in the city, and just take advantage of those opportunities so that you can develop your own lens of the city, so that you're not relying on external voices telling you what to think about Baltimore.
Absolutely, and I just want to add that not only are the individuals in Baltimore just tremendous, like everyone I'm sure will mention, people in Baltimore are just, it's a tight-knit community. They're really resilient. They're wonderful people, but also Baltimore has so many resources available to its residents, whether it is housing or legal or food insecurity. So there's so many different opportunities for you to get involved. And I'm sorry, is it Haneefa? Okay, perfect.
Yes.
So just like Haneefa was saying, that you can get involved and really see these individuals in action by getting involved in making your own opinion. So it's really a wonderful city. I went to school here and now I'm working here, and every time someone mentions Baltimore, I just can't stop but singing its praises.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I've only been here since 2009, and I think I came with some of my own junk about preconceptions, even about poverty or about people who are living in disinvested in communities. And essentially, I guess what I would encourage is to build relationships, which Haneefa shared, with neighbors. Like, try to just listen to people, and don't come. It's hard not to, but don't come with these assumptions. And I mean, honestly, people keep you honest too. They'll call you on stuff, that they're not going to. I don't know. I've learned so much from the community of McKelvey Park and Amazing Grace, and it's Amazing Grace Lutheran Church, which is all good. But the community is, as you shared, resilient, but also because we're under-resourced. That when resources do come into the community, oh my God, what people can do! Like, it's unbelievable how much we can do together when we're given opportunities. So yeah, I guess my strongest recommendation would be to listen a lot, to ask questions and learn from people, even from a distance if there's ways to do that. I'm not sure what kind of game plans there are. It's a tricky season for all of us right now. So obviously sitting on a stoop, which is a Baltimore thing too, like sitting on a stoop and listening to people and getting to know one another is a lot stronger than trying to do it by phone or trying to do it by Zoom. But nonetheless, the stories will humble you, and the people's ability to be innovative and creative and entrepreneurial and all that. And then the other thing I would say is it's actually Baltimore. Like, we talk about that. Like, if for whatever reason in this city, people's paths cross all the time, and we're always engaging and interacting, and even this call, there was a little bit of a reunion stuff going on because we've worked with each other in different circles at different times and different projects, all trying to strengthen our city and our communities and our vulnerable neighbors to ensure that we're all, and I'm real interested in hearing about Project PLASE things, and especially with the current movement to try to organize around evictions. And anyway, I'll get out of the way, but yeah.
I would just follow up kind of on what Pastor Diittman was saying. Again, my name is Maura James. I'm use she, her pronouns. Just thinking about Baltimore and being Smaltimore. During my program year, I worked with the Men and Families Center over in East Baltimore, and then went back to finish my social work program, where I actually worked with United Workers, which is a community organizing group that works with Amazing Grace Lutheran Church around organizing in that neighborhood. So, and around a community land trust, which is when we talk about resilience and creativity. I mean, not everything that is in the wire, in the news, is wrong about Baltimore. We have a high, what's the word, blight issue in terms of vacant buildings. But communities are coming together to create community land trust, to create community ownership of land, to try to really change and bring in new models of thinking. And that's coming from the ground up. That's not coming from anchor institutions or the city itself. So I want to highlight that. I would also say for Baltimore, it's a city of neighborhoods. That's what everyone will say. So you can really learn something new in each neighborhood. I live in the Old Goucher Barclay neighborhood in Keilah, and I just realized we live literally like a block away from each other. But I think in that, Baltimore has a lot of unique characteristics, a lot of unique communities that you can't just like anything you'll learn, you can't categorize it by one thing. And in terms of coming in with your own stuff, I grew up in the Baltimore area, in and around, and I'm still learning and unlearning things that I learned growing up, and I'm unlearning some of my own, of course, internalized racism and white superiority as I'm a resident in Baltimore, and which is a majority Black city, but then also learning about the great features of Baltimore. Like we have been one of the nation's largest urban forests in West Baltimore, Lincoln Park and Glens Falls Trail. So I think there's a lot to learn and unlearn, and people will put you to task to do that work, which is great.
Yeah, thanks so much for all of those remarks. I pulled out a few gems that I'm going to share back, so redirect me, as Pastor Diittman did when I got the name of your church wrong. Forgive me. But I heard you say really great things, such as Baltimore is a network of neighborhoods and strong communities where there are supports within those communities, and they're tightly knit. And the best way to learn more is to get proximal to people's lived experience, whether that means sitting on your stoop, reading up on the history of Baltimore. I will share that Source has 3 modules that were designed by Community Student Partnership and involves the history, and will highlight for you some of the reasons that there is some resistance that community members hold folks from Hopkins accountable. And you need to know that precedes you in space and time, even if you are unaware of it. And so being mindful of that context is also really important. I encourage you to engage with those. You can find those on our website. I am inspired by the way that all of you engage and partner with community and center your work in community. So we know that there are stories that, as I mentioned, precede students in space and time about the relationship with Baltimore and the university. So keeping that history in mind, how do you recommend that students approach partnership activities in order to continue working from an anti-oppressive framework?
So I can start off this one. I think that the main piece to keep in mind is that, as Maura was saying, there are so many things to learn and unlearn. So keeping that open mind and making sure you start with talking from the community. So if you have a project that you're working to develop with the CBO, making sure that you speak with the neighborhood that that CBO is in and that that project will be impacting. So you really get a variety of perspectives, not only from the nonprofit or organization or your standpoint, but also from the residents who are going to be directly impacted. And of course, learning and unlearning can be uncomfortable, but it's such an important piece of the work we do. So just making sure that you go in with an open mind, ready to learn and ready to recognize where you can grow as an individual. I think that's kind of key.
Yeah, I kind of have that same vibe, I think. So making sure, so one of the pieces, so I talk about Hopkins as a mini-headed dragon, right? Like, so there's heads that are really kind and gracious, like in the, some of those movies that are better. Yeah, and then there's the heads that'll just burn the hell out of you, like just, damn, shit, that hurts. And so I suppose you have to understand that because you're wearing a Hopkins badge, you may get, if somebody's been burned, they're gonna, they may come at you. I mean, they may come at you hard. I can tell you too, I mean, I'm just gonna flip it for a second, but like in the church is notoriously pitiful, bad about judging people. Like They're so crappy about that. And so sometimes when people come to Amazing Grace, they may burn me really hard because they've been burned really hard. And that's totally legitimate. And it's not up to me to, like, you know, get defensive about it. I sometimes have to take the heat because the heat's been thrown on historically for generations, right? And so that being said, Hopkins has that same kind of dynamic. So while there has been intentionality and efforts to reverse that and make authentic relationships occur, there still is a lot of history, and there's still things that happen. And even, like, I'll use this example. One time I was writing, and there was a new apartment building being built. Like, we're 7 blocks east. We're right near Men and Family too. And so there's a Jefferson or Washington Square was being built. And the two people I was in the car with said, "Oh, they're building those apartments for Hopkins." You know, now it's so interesting because that building's not related to Hopkins, except that houses were torn down, neighbors were displaced, and a new high-rise luxury apartment building was rented. So the perception is still very present. So anyway, I would just say go back to listening. Like, number one thing is listen. And I appreciate the idea of trying to cultivate, like every program that we try to do at Amazing Grace is resident requested. What's going to help you heal? What's going to benefit your family? What's going to help our neighborhood be a better place to live? And then from that, community members sort of dictate the programming, and the programming gets shaped and formed. And the danger with Hopkins sometimes is expertise and prescriptive knowledge is not helpful. Like, it has to be, even though it's important to have expertise, it's important to be knowledgeable. Having conversations, building relationships and trust, coming to consensus about what we can do to solve this together is what's going to be more helpful than, hey, we've looked at you and here's how to fix you, right? Nobody likes that. I mean, I don't like that. So it may be true, but I don't like it, right? I want to participate in making those decisions. So I'll be quiet. I'm a rambler.
And I'll just add to that, to what Jordan and Gary have already said. And I think part of it is just sort of orienting yourself with the history of Baltimore, but then also the history between Baltimore, the Baltimore community, and Hopkins specifically, just so that it can, sort of provide some context in terms of the potential challenges that people may be facing within the city, the potential challenges that you may face as a student. We sort of instruct our students to go through, to sort of self-reflect and to think about, like, their identity, their positionality, or where they come from and their background, and how that might influence their interactions. So I would encourage you to if you're starting a project, to go through that process. As Jordan mentioned, it's a process of learning and unlearning. And part of learning is listening, and part of learning is, sort of doing some of that work beforehand, before you actually engaging.
Yeah, I would follow up on what, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say thank you to Haneefa, and honor, she informed me that she had to leave a little early. So honor that contribution as your final one, and say thank you for joining us. Please continue, Maura.
I was just going to follow up on what Dr. Saleem said of, I believe that, I think Hopkins and Source helps kind of place us in the context of students, of trying to understand that relationship of Hopkins to Baltimore and what that looks like in the past. I think trying to understand how that looks today, staying active now on things of, like, social media, Facebook. There's a Baltimore City Voters group that you can join to track Baltimore Twitter. I think that's a good way to kind of keep up to date on what's going on, because it's not like, this isn't just, I think what Pastor Diittman was saying is, like, that this is still active history of how Hopkins is engaging. And then also, beyond that, the history of Baltimore. Baltimore was the first city in the country in 1910 to pass laws that segregated white and Black residents. And so the history of redlining and segregation and disinvestment in Black communities is very started here in a lot of ways and has had a lasting impact here. And so knowing that, the only other thing I would add is just as you're going into these roles, recognizing your role, or that you aren't necessarily intentionally taking on, but as a gatekeeper. So by being from Hopkins and a part of this community, and from all of the experiences that you are bringing, because everyone that is part of these programs has amazing expertise and experiences, you are a gatekeeper in a way, and it's how do you engage in that role? Is it that you are helping to open that gate and bring people and kind of break down barriers that there are, or are you possibly sustaining it without unintentionally or intentionally? And so trying to see your role in that and break that down on what Dr. Saleem said of reflecting on your positionality in that.
I was just going to follow up, Maura, with something you said earlier, and you kind of alluded to the housing again. The Land Trust actually just had their first ribbon cutting last Monday for our first house. So we have affordable housing in East Baltimore, and our target is to expand that to like 15 houses this year, assuming we can figure out funding. But yay! Sorry, we can talk more about that. That's a whole nother call, but permanently affordable housing, it's a big deal. So
a huge deal, and it's great work that is going on with the community land trusts in Baltimore for sure.
So that last comment is a great pivot to our next question. But before we go there, I want to share the gems that I heard from you and let folks know we're going to invite you to the conversation. If you have questions, drop those in the chat. My colleague Izzat is going to gather them by themes. And after my next question is answered from our panelists, we'll enter those into the conversation too. So we invite you to be a part of the conversation. But let me share the gems that I heard. Listening was an overarching theme. Being comfortable with learning and unlearning. I heard reflection so many times, and you know that that is one of Source's love languages, reflection, reflection, reflection. It is the dash between service and learning for us in the pedagogy of service learning. And we believe it is the way that you build meaning. So that resonates deeply with me in thinking about reflecting in particular on your own identities, right? And the bias that you bring and the ways that you've been socialized into beliefs about folks. It's really important. And the way that you unlearn some of those things is getting proximal to the history. So I definitely heard highlighting on the general history of Baltimore, the history of racial covenants, of redlining, and then the specific history of the university to Baltimore and East Baltimore in particular. Displacements happened. There's been erasure, right, of people's culture and history. And so getting proximal to that and being aware that there are tools that exist to help you do it. So I've mentioned the modules. I'll also mention there's some really great books. The Not in My Neighborhood, The Ghost of Johns Hopkins, The Lines Between Us, and anything at all by Lawrence Brown is going to give you a great history on redlining and housing displacement and why we're so excited to talk about housing, but also what has been perpetuated through space and time as a result of disinvestment, how it shows up even now as health disparities here in the city. So those are really powerful gems. Thank you so much to the panel for sharing those. I really like this idea of seeing yourself as a gatekeeper. You can perpetuate the oppression that exists and is baked into systems here, or you can be a disruptor and change it through your practice and your reflective understanding of self. So I think that gets us into a really important conversation on health and health equity, and hopefully we'll enter more information on housing. Please feel free to insert that element of your work, how you're connected to that. But what are some of the health challenges that you have noticed through your work in community, and how has partnership between students and community worked to overcome some of these challenges?
Well, a lot of the work at Amazing Grace, it is a distressed, underserved community. It has historic discrimination, and so a lot of the community, and we are dealing with healthcare disparities. We're dealing with violence. We're dealing with the opioid epidemic pretty severely. A lot of the work that we've tried to engage with and that we partner with Hopkins with on multiple levels, not just service learning, but also projects as we have a food pantry. Food insecurity is an issue in our community, so we We do have a food pantry, and I shared earlier, like since the pandemic, we were serving 20 to 35 families in client choice pantry before the pandemic. Now we're doing like 500 families a week with a grab and go pantry, which is pretty unbelievable. It's 3 trucks a week. I mean, I'm not even sure how we're managing, but I say God keeps showing off as a way. There's a community garden, and the neighborhood uses that food in the pantry as well. But also there's this, many community members have endured trauma, generational trauma, and a lot of that trauma is centered in violence. And so we partner with a lot of different organizations to try to create ways for people to heal from that trauma. And it's been pretty tricky lately because of, so we can't do the yoga right now. We can't do the mindfulness meditation right now. We haven't been able to do things because of social distancing that we want to do. We're still maintaining the community gardening is just sort of relaunched again in a socially distanced way, and we're kind of getting that underway. And then we also partner with Behavioral Health Leadership Institute to provide a Suboxone clinic, which assists people who are trying to lessen their addiction to heroin. So all of that's happening. You know, we have a wellness center next to the church. But anyway, that the idea is, and the healthcare disparities too, just trying to connect people with opportunities and resources that formerly have been kept away from community members. But I think trying to bring an influx of organizations, groups, nonprofits, even Hopkins, to help connect people with resources that will make life better. That's sort of, does that make sense?
With Project PLASE, we work a lot with healthcare. Housing and healthcare is very cyclical in that really twofold. One, if you are present with a health condition, whether it is physical, whether it is mental health challenges or trauma, and coupled with, of course, the lack of affordable healthcare, the lack of affordable housing, and all the other inequities that a lot of our clients are faced with, it just augments not only your chances of becoming homeless, but makes it even more difficult to get out of it once you are in that situation. And not only that, but being homeless in and of itself takes a toll on your body. So we have a lot of clients who have been homeless or considered chronically homeless, which is being actively homeless for more than a year. So I've spoken with some of our clients who were suffering with a substance use disorder and were homeless for decades, and now they're finally housed and addressing those barriers to housing stability. So I think a lot of the times, particularly when partnering with students and Source and Hopkins, a lot of it is trying to break those stigmas and trying to make the general public understand that this issue is present, and that a lot of times these individuals aren't experiencing homelessness because they're lazy or because they can't go get a job. It's so many more in-depth issues that are being faced in those situations. So definitely learning and things like that are very important when working with our students, so we can let people know that those issues are there and how we need to address them.
I'm maybe on slightly a different end of this, so I don't do as much direct work. My job right now is in city government in the city's budget office. I'm our legislative and engagement lead. And so I think the way that, I mean, Baltimore, we have a lot of health challenges, and it comes through in our policy and how our elected officials are trying to respond to stuff. So environmental racism and environmental justice around high asthma rates. Our city council passed legislation that would effectively, considering how it goes, shut down the incinerator that we have in our city. And so on my end, I think the way that it's coming through and the work that Hopkins professors and students are doing with community is in this advocacy realm. So there's a lot that is going on around trauma-informed care right now. The city passed a trauma-informed care bill that was heavily informed and engaged with the research around this, and a lot of it coming out of Hopkins. We've had professors and I think even some of the work come out of some of the practicum classes that goes to community groups come and present at city council meetings to really say, this is the research, this is what we see, this is why we need action. And so that's where I am seeing it on my side. And I'd say keep it up, keep pushing, because we need the change, and that research and that foundation is important to push people in that way.
All really valuable responses, and I'm going to share back the gems that I heard. So I heard about connecting with people to make life better based on their terms, so community identified, change strategies, and partnering to work towards the change that communities have identified, cross-sector collaborations that include students and folks from Hopkins, but may really be about organizations partnering and working together to identify resources. I also heard about partnering to break stigma and building visibility about the interconnected and complicated factors and barriers that lead to various types of health challenges here in Baltimore. And then I heard about the importance of research, committing research to changing policy, to informing what change can look like and how it's worked other places, but also to address these stigmas and address some of the barriers that exist in the community. So
Keilah, can I just add, getting that, and then getting that research in the hands of community to do the advocacy is what I want to add on the end of that.
Yes, thank you so much for saying that, right? That goes back to a comment that Pastor Diittman said, that we're not showing up to fix you, right? We're showing up to bolster the work that you're already committed to, giving you the language that policymakers and researchers speak so that you can speak it and be empowered to be the change that you want to see. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for adding that, Maura. So this is the part where we open it up for you all to the questions that you may have. And if you don't have any questions, I've been pulling out gems and I have more, but I want to share this space. So if you have any questions, feel free to either drop them in the chat or unmute yourself even and pose the question to the panel.
Yeah, may I just ask a question that might be on the minds of some students? And that is, thank you. And that question is, you know, Mindi started off by mentioning, and there has been a thread throughout, of getting involved remotely. And so, you know, this notion of it's summer now and then first term and second term, could you just maybe somebody share an example of what that might look like?
Great question.
I'm going to start off with a shameless plug. I work very, very closely with the volunteer program, so I just love the opportunity to get new minds involved. So right now, Project PLASE is actually working on a development project to convert a 66,000 square foot building in Irvington into affordable housing for 90 homeless individuals. So right now, a lot of our remote volunteers are doing wonderful work, not only helping getting that word out and doing social media campaigns and reaching out to different organizations that we can spread the word, but also looking for grant opportunities to try to close that funding gap. So at the end of the day, we're hoping to start construction within 18 months, and it's a $24 million project. So we have most of the funding, but we definitely need all the help we can get to kind of close that gap. And of course, Project PLASE, we have a lot of different programs: permanent temporary housing, a food pantry, clothing closet. I could go on for a long period of time, but essentially the point, I guess, is there are so many opportunities to do remote work. We actually have students that have been doing health workshops via Zoom, students that have been working on social media campaigns. So absolutely, I always tell people, if you're not 100% sure how you want to volunteer, but you want to get involved and you want to make a difference, definitely reach out, and I guarantee you we can find something that will fit what you're looking to do. So thank you for asking that, Marie.
Pastor Diittman, will you jump in? You were sharing some really great socially distant opportunities for involvement.
Yeah, I was just brainstorming about like what would be the remote piece, and I'm not sure exactly what that looks like yet. That would be something for me to contemplate a little bit. I mean, there's social media opportunities. We can always use help with some of that. But the tricky part is even with the food pantry, like one of the things, we had a COVID positive volunteer that kind of changed our whole policy about inviting volunteers every week because, you know, it required all of us to get tests and blah, 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 blah. It was just a nightmare. And so now we have like a core group of 5 volunteers that are the same volunteers for all 3 trucks. We have all 5 volunteers unload the trucks, all 5 volunteers pack all the food bags. I mean, it's pretty crazy that, but that's sort of for safety reasons. But anyway, so I'm not sure. I guess the gardening, of course. I mean, if people are in Baltimore, like every Saturday, practically, we're meeting for gardening, and we actually, the land trust, which is behind the church, and there's some church property too. There's 18 lots, and we have orchards, and we have plants, and we have a rain garden, we have a pollinator garden. There's lots. There's a prayer labyrinth. There's space that needs love all the time. Because it's a beautiful space, sadly, that means it's a good place to use drugs. So, you know, we have to be careful and we have to clean syringes. We have to do all those things safely, of course, with proper disposal boxes and all that stuff. But there's lots of things people could do individually or with the group when we gather. But I'm not sure how helpful that is. If anybody wants to help record like sermons digitally, you know, I'm very bad at doing that. So I never knew you could have so many daggone tapes of a sermon. But anyway, so yeah, I don't know how helpful that is really, to be honest.
I'm happy to chime in and offer some information about remote virtual opportunities that we have. Our source team has been throughout the summer talking with our network of over 100 nonprofit organizations here in Baltimore to talk to them about how we can have virtual opportunities for our students. A lot of our community organizations, they're also working remotely. Some are having in-person opportunities such as food pantries and those sorts of things. And so it's kind of re-envisioning. A lot of the organizations, they're still having their team meetings, but they're having their team meetings over Zoom or WebEx or Microsoft Teams. And so students can be a part of those meetings without having to do any kind of commuting and parking and all that kind of good stuff. And so a lot of the service learning courses that we traditionally run in person are moving to online this year. And there are people that are basically some of them having their first time doing that. We're lucky that we have members of our team that have supported as well as taught online service learning courses. So Dr. Saleem, she talked about her service learning course, which is a qualitative research course series that teaches folks how to do key informant interviews and focus groups and other methods of qualitative research. So we do that with community organizations here in Baltimore. That means that our students will be having key informant interviews over the phone or over Zoom or some kind of video feature, and they'll have focus groups in that same manner, virtually online, and utilizing that space and utilizing breakout rooms. There was a mention, I think Maura had mentioned we have a formulating policy course that's also a service learning course and meets the MPH practicum requirement, some hours of that, not the full 100 hours, that Dr. Shannon Frateroli teaches. And we're going to be moving forward with, again, putting together some policies with organizations here in Baltimore. So you're just going to be, instead of envisioning yourself in person at an organization, you're still going to be face-to-face with organizations, but you're going to be doing that either Zoom and other functions, Skype, whatever, or on phone calls. So there's lots of opportunities that we're moving into that space. And there will also still be group work that'll be done. So you are going to be collaborating, but you're not going to necessarily be in person, but we're going to be using all these different digital tools to make sure that we're connected, engaged, bringing our minds, our passion, our talents, and those wonderful gifts together to collaborate.
So Mindi, that was a perfect segue into really helping folks understand that Source is your liaison. Sources championed relationships. That was a key point that Pastor Diittman pointed out with community-based organizations, mostly in East Baltimore, though we are spreading our wings. And in this work, we intentionally engage our community-based organizations to identify what they need. And we have a series of programs, co-curricular and curricular, that connect to addressing those needs. So the great thing is getting involved with SOURCE allows you to address community identified needs in the ways that have been highlighted here. Also allows you to perhaps get practicum credit or course credit as you do so. Allows you to be involved in a sustainable system. So instead of just coming in with your own idea of how to fix community, you are coming in and connecting to a network of relationships, addressing the needs identified in the network of relationships. And then as you move to the next space, whether it's another class or completing your coursework, other students come in and pick up where you left off. So we're not leaving the community in a gap and not without the resources that we identified we would show up to provide. This is a really great way for us to point you to how do you get involved. So we have, as Mindi mentioned, a newsletter that comes out weekly, The Scoop. You can subscribe to The Scoop simply by sending an email to source@jhu.edu to find out more about these opportunities. You'll find out more about joining our student governing board, which helps us identify community-based organizations to work with and really helps us spread the word to the student population about who we are and what we do. And they serve as brand ambassadors and critical service learning leaders. They really are helping us move the information out to you, but also bringing the information from you back to us so that we are centering you as stakeholders and thinking about you as we move about our work. Getting involved with our donation drives. Those are changing. We can't do them in person, but they still will exist for us to be responsive to our community-based organizations. The Scoop will give you more information on service learning courses, on co-curricular opportunities. So you definitely want to sign up. It's a great way to get more information. And if you really want to be connected to a community-based organization and get really deep into the work that they're doing for an extended period of time, we invite you to consider the Source Service Scholar Program. This is an opportunity for you to learn how to be a project manager, to work with a community-based organization for the entire academic year, to receive a slight stipend, which never hurts, but also to grow in your skills in volunteer management, critical reflection, cultural humility, organizing. And we have an information session that if you haven't already RSVP'd for, it's full at this point, but we can record it and send it out to you. And the best way to find out is to sign up for the Scoop. So we are thankful to all of our panel members. If you could use your hand clap emoji or just maybe clap in the windows and thank them for their contributions today. And as I said, we look forward to helping you get connected to community. Getting connected to the Scoop is the best way to take a next step. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Source,
everyone.
and all the panelists.
Thanks, everyone. I guess that concludes our event here. So I'll stop recording now.